Good to see everybody today. Before I sit down, I just want to make sure that you can see Geshe and myself clearly and that you can hear me clearly. All right. And the lighting is really nice today because we had a snowfall. So when the snowfall comes, the lighting is really clear. There was a big snowfall yesterday. All right. Geshe was like, you won't have to get up again, will ya? Let's cross our fingers and hope not. No, I think this works. Yeah, looks good. So firstly, Tashidele, greetings to all Dharma friends. Geshe hopes that you are all well and he wishes you success in all your activities. Sorry. It's turning the sound off here. Sorry. Okay. Oh. Oh, just so can everyone hear us all right? Okay, great.
Oh, yeah,
So in terms of what we are gathered here today to do, in terms of that vast motivation, then we often discuss that aspect of things. But also in terms of our sort of motivation, in terms of things to do with this life, it's very important to understand that we are engaging in activities to establish our own happiness, as well as to develop the capacity through our activities of body, speech, and mind to bring some measure of benefit to others. So Geshe was saying he doesn't expect you to be like a statue, perfect and unmoving in your practice all the time. He understands that circumstances change, life changes, but what we want to do is really commit to continuously trying to improve. That's the important thing here. And really, whether one is technically a believer in the Dharma or not, this remains very important. And if we are a Dharma practitioner, of course, this becomes even more important because ultimately our aim is the actualization of the two bodies, the pure Dharmakaya, the truth body, and the pure Rupakaya, the form body. So we need to amass the causes for that. So the Dharmakaya is the pristine state of mind once it has been completely purified. And so this analogy will work for you if you're in Ontario and probably for Marjorie up in New York. So it's like, right, today we've had this snowfall and everything is kind of pure and clean. That's the pristine state of mind of Dharmakaya. And of course, the form body, the Rupakaya, based upon that purification, one is able to manifest forms to benefit the welfare of others through body, speech, and mind. And we shouldn't think that all of these aims are something far off and we just need to sort of sit back for now, right? Achieving these ultimate aims is much like building the house. So we can get started on the foundation work right away. And of course, we are within samsara, we are within cyclic existence, so we're going to experience a lot of obstacles, a lot of problems. And for that reason, we need to develop our capacity to transform obstacles, to transform unfortunate conditions into the path. So, of course, when we speak about our mind, we know that on that sort of fundamental level, right, it does have this quality of purity, much like that driven snow. But there are these adventitious, this means something that can be removed, these adventitious defilements that cover that. And essentially, our task is to remove those. So enough introduction. Let us begin by placing the body and the mind in a relaxed state. The nature of our mind is like that freshly fallen snow. It is vast, pure, and unencumbered. Its nature is not defiled by attachment, jealousy, and so forth. These are not its true nature. Any faults of the mind that I experience, they are adventitious, removable. They are not part of the true nature of this. We can think of the analogy that if we have water with a lot of particles or sand in it, those particles temporarily obscure the clarity of the water, but they are not the nature of the water, because when the water is still, its clarity resumes. So many of these problems too, they come from our lack of knowledge, our inability to see the final mode of abiding of phenomena. In other words, the way things really are. If we're able to understand things' true nature, the way they really are, so many of these problems and disturbances will just melt away. Think about external phenomena. I think about myself, others, the body, the mind. They all have these many coarse and subtle aspects. I will strive to develop an understanding that comprehends all of this. Based upon developing that wisdom of understanding, I will use that wisdom, that prajna, to work for sentient beings as much as I possibly can to bring them benefit. To really be able to achieve this from the depths of my mind, from the bottom of my heart, I will make requests to the gurus and deities to be able to accomplish this. Let's do the short mandala. Guru Ratna Medala Gunayadaya. Refuge in bodhicitta. Sanje Chedan Zoge Chenan Lai Chongche Bardu Dani Jiangzu Ji Nagi Cheje Nibe Zonan Ki Jola Benjir Zanje Jola Reshu Sanje Chedan Zoge Chenan Lai Chongche Bardu Dani Jiangzu Ji Nagi Cheje Nibe Zonan Ki Jola Beje Songye Jobarshu Son Chedan Soki Chenan Lai Changje Badu Dani Kyasuchi Dagi Cheje Gibe Sonan Jola Beje Songye Jobarshu. So our main task, having achieved this valuable human body, this precious human rebirth, is to work towards the state of complete welfare of both ourselves and others. When we speak of achieving the final welfare or the final benefit of both self and others, these words, they come easily from our mouth. But in terms of actually achieving that task, that is something quite vast. What we'll find, though, is that when we bring forth this big aim, this big motivation, right at the beginning of our practice, and we really try to bring that forth in our mind, then whatever problems, whatever stress that has been bothering us, compared to that motivation, its strength is insignificant. So we'll see a lot of that stress, a lot of those problems just dissolving. So we can see this with, for example, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. We can see that no matter what sort of the internal conditions, he continues in his life happily with a stable mind. And in terms of being able to achieve that in a human body, we too can achieve this because we also possess this human body, this human mind, and so forth. So perhaps the easy part is bringing forth this vast motivation and working on bringing that forth in a stable way. But to actually achieve the aim that we mentioned in the motivation, then this requires something more, specifically training in hearing, contemplation, and meditation. So if we don't use hearing, contemplation, and meditation to habituate ourselves to the material of the teachings, we're not going to be able to get our conduct where our conduct needs to be. We're not going to be able to place our mind where the focus of the mind needs to be. We're not going to be able to see and understand the things that we need to be able to see and understand. And we can see that, right? Like what we're habituated to. Like, we don't want problems. We don't want conflicts with people. But sometimes just from speaking, just from saying the wrong things to somebody, all kinds of problems and disagreements manifest, right? We've all experienced that. In fact, like once the problem has manifested, then we think, oh, maybe what I said wasn't exactly the right thing. But by then it's too late, right? Person's already offended. So one of the benefits of regular meditation is that we're able to develop our capacity for mindfulness. As we develop mindfulness and learn to observe, what we'll find is it becomes actually a lot clearer to us in our life, what we need to say or what we shouldn't say, what we need to do or what we shouldn't do. This becomes much clearer with mindfulness. And if we establish this mind in a very vast way, then what we'll find is that the mind can be unwavering. In other words, we'll be able to maintain a very stable love and compassion, an extended stable love and compassion.
Lama
yeah. So in terms of actually achieving a positive mental quality such as love and compassion, in terms of really achieving that love and compassion, how do we know if we've achieved it? There's something in the mind that is very special, that really stands out. There's that love and compassion that's there, along with the ability to hold it and a feeling of joy. And that is remaining no matter if we're standing, walking, eating. It remains throughout our daily activities. If we are able to, just when we're engaged in those kind of everyday activities, maintain that love and compassion in a very stable way, that's a way to know if we have achieved love and compassion. So in terms of how to know if we've really achieved those positive mental qualities such as love and compassion or not, Geshe says that in a Lam Rim text, it actually explains it. And it's a little bit of a heavy example, so he begs your pardon, but he thinks that it's also a useful example. So if one's parents pass away, that feeling of grief that we have from the passing away of our parents or that person close to us, that is something that is going to pervade our experience for a very long time. It doesn't matter if we're at work, if we're eating, if we're lying down, if we're walking somewhere, that experience, right, of that grief is going to pervade. So it's the same thing with this love and compassion. If this love and compassion have been achieved, then they will be experienced pervasively throughout all our activities. So it's like that. And this is important to understand, right? Because we need to be able to distinguish if we have achieved renunciation, definite emergence or not. We need to be able to distinguish if we've achieved love or compassion or not. We need to be able to distinguish if we have achieved bodhicitta or not. So this analogy helps us with that. Yeah. And also it would be like a little bit strange also, like imagine if you achieved love, compassion, or bodhicitta and you didn't realize it. That would be a little bit weird, right? So let's try to bring forth some of these qualities in the context of our motivation. And let's begin with just settling or relaxing the body and mind. Any dispersive thoughts, stress, whatever unwholesome thoughts or feelings have arisen, these just dissolve. The true nature of the mind is pure luminosity, and just as that is true for my mind, so too do all the 6 types of sentient beings within samsara possess this lineage or potential. Just as we wish for those beings who are close to us to be able to achieve happiness, and we also wish for those strangers, those beings who don't know, to achieve happiness. And we also wish for those we perceive as enemies, or those that we find difficult to achieve happiness. And fourth, a wish with happiness in every last type of sentient being, 6 types of sentient beings in this instant. With all of the problems that occur between the 6 types of sentient beings, they come from these feelings of holding some close and others far, attachment and aversion. How wonderful if beings could be separated from holding some close and others far, attachment and aversion. May this be so. Having separated myself and others, all beings from attachment and aversion, holding some close and others far. And fourth, the wish of bodhicitta, may I bring them all to light. I really set my mind to it and work at it as much as possible, I definitely can achieve this state and lead others to it. Why is this the case? Because whether we speak of the faults of the mind or the positive mental qualities, neither of these things is permanent or inherently existent. Therefore, they are all changeable. Transformation is possible.
What they are direct Yakamolo Yoba Machine, Mano,
And not only do we have this motivation, but we have a method which is both complete and unmistaken to be able to achieve it. So this is something really wonderful.
What a type Chinese, Shira Chinese,
Whether we speak from the side of method, whether we speak from the side of wisdom, there are countless things that we can cultivate to progress as much as possible. So this is a great opportunity.
What a meal that has Melo Sabit
All the great lamas say that although the king of prayers has this word of prayers in it, actually it is a set of instructions that we can begin implementing right from the beginning of the path. And so then in terms of where we are, so I've actually been working on these outlines, and my project over the Christmas holiday is going to be to get all of these outlines too, but I'm working on it. So we are in the actual prayers. And so then in terms of the first outline that we have covered the practice which allows the non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta. The practice which allows the non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta. Samdak Jangsen Mijepa Marabe. Oh, sorry. Sorry. We're on another outline. My apologies. Sampadap Nampadapalatene. So we have covered the prayers based upon the first pure mind or pure intention. And so within those, there are many different points. And so actually within those broader outlines, there are certain parts of the prayer that don't necessarily have outlines. Yeah, and so the next one, now we come to it. So now we come to the non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta, as I mentioned, my apologies, the non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta. And then so within this non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta, there are various points, and today we are on the sixth of those. Serab Jemba, Rabdu Chungwa, Chopa Chidang Sujum Didijwa. So I'll read the outlines that we have covered from this non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta larger heading. So we have covered the recollection of former lifetimes. We have covered renouncing or leaving the home life. We have covered training in outer conduct and inner ethics. We have covered teaching Dharma in myriad languages. And so now we are on the sixth point, which is exerting in virtue. So the broader vision of this, right, in the context of the prayer, is seeing other sentient beings as precious, as important. And then these are the things that we need to do, having seen them as precious, having seen them as important, to be able to work for their welfare. And so then in addition to the sixth point of exerting in virtue, then we have this second point, the seventh point, the seventh point, which is not forgetting bodhicitta by way of 5 causes. So this is what we were speaking about earlier in the session, right? These are points which are going to allow us to maintain a constant mindfulness, a constant awareness of bodhicitta. So His Holiness says that actually in life he's experienced obstacles and difficulties falling like rain. However, because of the presence of bodhicitta in his life, the mind is able to remain undisturbed. And of course, if we want to have bodhicitta in our mind in a stable way like that, what do we need to do to achieve that? As much as possible, we need to engage in the practices to develop bodhicitta. Otherwise, we won't be able to maintain that stability. And if we say that, okay, I'm going to engage in this cultivation when things are going well, when I feel happy, that's not really going to be able to bring forth the transformation that we need. We need to think, I need to be able to maintain this mindfulness, maintain this practice of bodhicitta, even during times of difficulty. So we need to practice, right, taking obstacles, non-conducive conditions into the path. So also we can see that this lack of familiarity, right, it inhibits us in other practices. For example, the Lama say, it's needless to say that if one has not habituated or trained in patience, then when anger arises, to say be patient, that's not something we're really going to be able to do. So the key is when we're more relaxed, we cultivate the practices. For example, patience, we familiarize ourselves with that as much as possible. And then when the difficult moment arises, that tool is going to be accessible to us to implement. And so then that was the reason that there was this one Lama who was sort of, people thought he was talking to himself, but he was actually speaking to his afflictions. And he said, you know, if you leave me alone and relax, I will be relaxed. But if you start creating problems, I will push back and counter you. So certain lamas, they would keep different colored stones for positive and negative thoughts. And then at the end of the day, they would count them to see how they were doing, or they would make a mark, right, like a chalk mark, a line on the wall to compare how the unwholesome and wholesome thoughts were going. So we need to maintain an awareness of how we're doing. And so some lamas, if they did well that day, right, if the wholesome things were greatly outnumbering the unwholesome things, then they would treat themselves to a nice cup of tea or a nice meal or something, and they would praise their practice, right? Correct? Oh, right. And so they would be celebrating their practice, and although they were in solitary retreat, that maybe the neighbors around, they thought, oh, this person has guests or something like that. And of course, if the stones representing or the lines representing the unwholesome things outnumbered the wholesome, then the practitioner would admonish themselves and say, you know, you're wasting your human rebirth and you must learn to do better. So these are some sort of essential instructions from the oral tradition. So I mean, we can try to implement those or not, but what we need to see is like what works for us, right? So have we developed our practice enough so that when anger arises, we're able to stop it in its tracks, or at least diminish it? Is that something we're able to do? So we can reflect in that way.
No to chomeba, so chomeba, Gangachi, Carpage to any I could say Carpage to that future and do. Or that did
We need to habituate ourselves so that we have the tools that we need. So, for example, if we're stressed out, if we're experiencing some depression or nervousness in our mind, then because of our habituation, we'll be able to understand, okay, this is the antidote to those types of discursive thoughts, right? To that type of stressful mind. So I'm going to use this antidote and apply it to diminish that disturbance, right? That's where we want to get to. So these are all methods, right, to apply the instructions, to actually apply them so that we can experience that improvement. Listen, all right. Facebook done with you. So normally, and so these are the milestones, right? Being able to use these tools in our practice, these are the milestones to mark in life. You know, the Lamas say it's not as important to mark like, well, you know, these days on Facebook, we have, you know, I visited such and such a city or such and such a country, or I ate this really delicious food at this restaurant. And like, we're documenting all of those types of things, right? But what we should actually be documenting is this type of progress that Geshe was mentioning. So of course, not forbidding you to kind of document your nice vacations or the nice things that you're eating or whatever. That's not at all. That's not the point that's being made. But the point is that of equal importance to that, another thing that we should be keeping track of is when I'm experiencing an obstacle, when I'm experiencing something difficult, have I been able to take the tools that I have learned through the Dharma and been able to use or implement those? This is an awareness that's very important to cultivate. And so then to go back to this outline, which is speaking about the mind bringing forth a non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta, we can speak of that non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta from the perspective of relative bodhicitta and from the perspective of ultimate bodhicitta. And then in terms of the non-forgetfulness of the relative bodhicitta, we can think of non-forgetfulness of the relative king-like bodhicitta, the relative captain-like bodhicitta, and the relative shepherd-like bodhicitta. And some lamas present it as non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta coming forth from equalizing and exchanging self and others. So when we think about the bodhicitta specifically in this way, according to those different presentations, this definitely will help to bring it forth in our mind. And so another point that we should mention here that's particularly important, and this is particularly important if you've received the engaging bodhisattva vows, but even if you've received the aspirational bodhicitta with a promise, it's very important to engage with this practice, which are the 4 factors which prevent degeneration of bodhicitta in this lifetime, and the 4 factors which prevent the degeneration of bodhicitta in future lifetimes. So the mere wishing bodhicitta, then maybe not as much of a problem because you haven't actually made the promise yet. You're just thinking like how nice it would be to bring forth this mind. But if you're making the bodhicitta with the promise and the engaging bodhicitta with those bodhisattva vows, more important. So bodhicitta with the promise, right? Aspiring bodhicitta with the promise, we've made the promise to bring forth that mind. So there's a commitment there. And then, of course, if we've taken bodhisattva vows, that's engaging bodhicitta and even more commitment related to that.
Oh, that is more that
Oh,
oh, that Kangalo Nazo say, yeah,
and when we hear these instructions, we see that all of them are really methods for clearing away the difficulties, the obstacles within our mind. That's what these methods are for.
Oh, that is what that tells on you said no you get much
Oh. Okay, so yes, so we are on page 6, everybody who's following along. The first verse on page 6, may I be gentle-minded, cultivating the 6 paramitas and never forget bodhicitta. So Geshe is actually glossing never forget bodhicitta, because in the Tibetan, that sentence actually comes first.
Yes,
So we talked about actually already, right? This discussion was about how important it is to not forget bodhicitta. So we've already kind of covered that.
Oh, that
And so then in order to be able to do that, the next thing that we need to do, a subheading here is, we need to abandon those non-conducive conditions. And why do we need to pay attention to this? Because we can see through our experience that when we try to bring forth love, compassion, and so forth, we might be able to maintain that mind for a short period of time, but eventually it falls away, doesn't it? So why is that? It's because we are habituated to the obstacles to maintaining those minds, to the obstacles to bringing forth those minds. That is the reason. And so then we make a prayer to be able to clear away those obstacles, which have to do with negative karma and have to do with clearing away obscurations. We make the prayer to be able to completely cleanse them and also not to make those same mistakes again. So let's read the verse from the beginning. May I be gentle-minded, cultivating the 6 paramitas and never forget bodhicitta. May I completely cleanse without omission every negativity and all that obscures this awakening mind. So negativity here, right? We all understand this. This is the non-meritorious karma, the unwholesome karma that all of us have accumulated in some measure. And of course, the heaviest types of this unwholesome karma are the 5 actions of immediate retribution, such as killing one's parents and so forth, but also all of the other unwholesome actions, maybe not as severe, but those still are obscuring us. And similarly, if we reflect in this way, we see it's definitely possible that we have accumulated the karma to be reborn in the unfortunate realms of existence. And so we want to be able to cleanse all that obscures. So here, obscures is referring to those obscurations, and there are 2 types of obscurations. right? The obscurations of the afflictions, so the afflictive obscurations, and the obscurations to omniscience, or the knowledge obscurations. I usually translated it as the afflicted obscurations and the knowledge obscurations. So we understand that we have accumulated this negative karma. We have accumulated this negative karma due to afflictions, which arise because of these obscurations, right? The afflicted obscurations and the knowledge obscurations. And if we don't do anything, right, this problem is going to remain. However, the obscurations and the afflictions are said to have one positive quality, and that is that they are not permanent. They are changeable. So we must engage in the practice to clear them.
Yes.
So the Lamas talk about them having this one quality, right? And that's to encourage us that this quality is that they can be cleared away, right? They can be changed. So whether we speak about negative karma or whether we speak about the underlying afflictions of attachment, anger, and ignorance, if we use those antidotes that were mentioned and we apply those antidotes, these can be diminished and eventually cleared away completely. So that's quite an amazing thing, actually. And don't forget about the story of Mahindra, right? The story of the father and son. The son was a prince who, under bad advice, he killed his father, the king. So this is one of those 5 actions of immediate retribution. And later, despondent, he approached the Buddha, right? Concerned for his future. And then the Buddha explained that with purification and confession, and specifically wisdom realizing emptiness, even the heaviest negativity can be completely cleared away. And then from applying this advice, even despite having done that, and so eventually, despite having accumulated that negativity, because he practiced, he was able to become a hearer. He was able to actualize the Dharma jewel in that very same lifetime. So probably none of us here, perhaps, but probably none of us here has the karma of killing a human being. That's kind of unlikely. So if a being that has done that can progress in that way, then needless to say that we in our current situation can make real progress. So that's important to understand this wisdom that we bring forth, and also to understand this point about purification. But there's a caveat here, which is the tarpa le zoela tene tobio marisra lengen but but we need to be clear here, right, that purification of negative karma and exhaustion of negative karma, that is not enough to achieve liberation. Liberation cannot be achieved through purification practices alone. So we need to understand that it's the exhaustion of ignorance, the elimination of ignorance, which allows us to achieve the state of liberation. It's the elimination of ignorance together with its latencies or imprints left behind that allows us to achieve the state of complete enlightenment, Buddhahood. So it is said, the Lamas give a very nice example that even if there's like a darkened room or a cave which has been in darkness for hundreds and hundreds of years, the moment that you open the door to that place, or the moment that you light a lamp in that place, instantaneously, all those hundreds of years of darkness is eliminated. The place becomes illuminated.
세계 북에 때도 시라 대화 지시에서는 대가로 고생을 파이로 야마과 연다 산도스 세계점 디와스
양ger스나니
로바스는 뭐바데 대가로 쿠와트는 매로 그러와
야야
된 노지
야야
나로스 노게 녀다 이나요
야야
시라야 또 쳐로서나
야
대가로 세계는 파코로 이로 야마도 같이 연다 설 대가 세나거든요 야마
So we need to understand also that this holds for us, like just as that light illuminates that place that has been dark for all of that time, once we bring forth that wisdom, then all of the confusion, the obscurations, the darkness within us will be instantly kind of cleared away.
지 발라 노지 코슈 저거 할래 비차 지금 저거 노는 요아래 제때 거를 진조서는 그런 파탄도 요아
So we have those waves on the ocean. You can have giant waves when it gets very windy, but we know that once the wind ceases, right, the calmness is restored.
세시오 세는 파이로 그러와스
So with the practice of wisdom, that ignorance dissolves within the mind, and similarly that darkness of ignorance is cleared away within the mind. So may I completely cleanse without omission every negativity and all that obscures this awakening mind. May I cleanse this all right now, and also in the future may I abandon such negativities. So then in terms of where we are in the text, we have covered two important points. Bringing a wish through the pure mind, and also the points about non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta. And so actually the next ones, as they go along, it's not like sort of how to say outlines within outlines. It's a little bit easier as we go along. That's what Kawa do tanda. Di jela nanso numangela wa.
Di jela ha di jela ma. Magi shebi goni member. Magi ba din diwas. Tanda soso ti lapa tin diwas.
Kawa do.
Tanda lapa diwas.
Oh, okay, right. And so then within the non-forgetfulness of bodhicitta, then magupe chudang. Right. So the next outline is untainted conduct for benefit and happiness. So I'll read the verse. I'll just give the outline again. Sorry, there's outlines within outlines, so I get confused. But this is definitely the outline. Untainted conduct for benefit and happiness. And that brings us to the second verse on page 6. May I traverse all my lives in the world, free of karma, afflictions, and interfering forces, just as the lotus blossom is undisturbed by the water's wave, just as the sun and moon move unhindered through the sky.
This one? Oh, that Magipa said, Pena, that the morning of the watching. Magipa spent a metal pemate. Metal pemate, Yashi, we got such a can, so what you do, the one mobile Pachino, Koshem, was. Corolla, the water to dig with your
So undisturbed means that the lotus blossom, it kind of grows up from the swampy place, maybe that is a little bit dirty, but when it reaches the surface of that water, not only is it clean, but it is also undisturbed. So
akosara gom tiso gosa karisheba yinayo. Yosate koinya was.
So similarly, our practice of hearing, contemplation, and meditation and so forth, it's within the muck of samsara, right? Because we do abide within samsara. We abide within cyclic existence.
But
just like that lotus, right? The seed and the sprout come up from within the mud. But despite from where it originates, it abides as this pure flower on the surface of the water. But when we are practicing, then just like that lotus, we have to make sure that we are free of karma, afflictions, and interfering forces. So if we are separated, for example, from the 8 worldly dharmas, then we will be sort of less affected by those faults of samsara. So, for example, our practice of generosity, if we give generosity to somebody who is poor, thinking that maybe in the future I'll get help or benefit from him in return, that means that our practice is a little bit tainted by those interfering forces or by the world. So if we can take our practice of the Dharma and separate it from like the 8 worldly concerns and the other sort of afflicted ways of thinking, then that practice becomes something much more powerful. So then when we are speaking about these interfering forces, to help you conceptualize this, you can think of these interfering forces as being the 4 maras, or the 4 demons. Sorry, Nyomongpedu? So the Mara, son of the gods, the Mara of the afflictions, the Mara of the aggregates. Yeah, sorry. So the Mara of the afflictions, the Mara of the Lord of death, the Mara of the son of the gods, and the Mara of the aggregates. My apologies. And so we want to be able to completely sort of be free or defeat those afflicting forces, such as those 4 maras. And so when we think of the difficulties within samsara, these are the main things that are mentioned here. And getting rid of these 4 maras or these 4 demons completely is not something that is so easy. So it's said that, for example, the hearers and the solitary realizers, they're only able to get rid of the coarse manifestation of those 4 maras. They're not able to get rid of those 4 maras on the most subtle level.
remember it was
Geshe. Oh, Ling, that's what covered it.
the guy wrote it, when you detail, le,
okay, so I see what the problem is. Yeah. So actually, in the translation, I'm sorry, I've tried like 2 or 3 different translations, and even this updated translation is incomplete. And I'm sorry to say that, but I have to be honest with you because you may be wondering why I keep asking back to Geshe. Free of karma and the demons of afflictions. So free of karma and the demons of afflictions, and the maras of afflictions. As far as I see, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not in the translation. But actually, this is very important, especially from what Geshe has been explaining. So maybe just add that there. Free of karma and the demons of afflictions.
what are so daily
So to be free from those ourselves, and also to be free and untainted by those when we are working for the benefit of others. So there are 2 examples to sort of demonstrate how this is working. And the first is that blossom, which comes from the mud but abides clean on the water. And in the same way, right, we are functioning within samsara, but our practice is untainted by samsara. Yes. So just as the sun move unhindered through the sky, that means the sun and move unhindered, and therefore they are able to benefit, right? They are able to shine their light upon the crops, which is able to sprout the seeds and is able to allow us to secure our harvest. And because they move unhindered through the sky, right? The sky is unobscured. There's no obstacles. Because they move unhindered through the sky, they're able to perform all of those functions that help us. It's an interesting paradox, though, because we derive so much benefit from the moon and especially from the sun, but we also understand that they're just kind of circling through the sky without any particular wish to benefit, right? They're not sentient beings. They don't have any particular wish to benefit, but yet we derive so much of what is important from them. So if we are able to sort of move unencumbered by those afflictions, by the 4 demons, by those interfering forces, and base our help, our assistance to other sentient beings on the absence of those things in that unencumbered way, then we will be able to be of great benefit. We can see that our love and compassion, they may be tainted right now because they are mixed with attachment, right? Like we work to benefit, to help somebody, but it's often with the thought afterwards, perhaps, of they owe us something, or I've shown them this kindness, so perhaps they will show me kindness in the future. So the attachment that we have for ourselves and the attachment and the bias we have for the people close to us, that hinders our love and compassion from being that real sort of unbiased love and compassion. So these are how based, even though we have this body which is within samsara, right? If we transform our mind, we can achieve these actions that benefit, that are beyond samsara. We have many opportunities to take this love and compassion that we have at the moment, tainted by attachment, and bring it to a practice which is that love and compassion untainted by attachment. And so then the next one is to work for the benefit of sentient beings. May I ease the suffering in the lower realms and in the many directions and dimensions of the universe. May I guide all wanderers in samsara to the pure bliss of awakening and be of worldly benefit to them as well. So the situation of samsara, right? The extent of samsara is something that is kind of like vast and uncountable, like the sky, like space. But through our intention, virtue, and prayers, what we want to do is transform, create the causes to transform this place into a pure land, into a Buddha field. And that's and you'll remember we talked about one of the outlines, which was purifying the place. So this is like the same mentality. May I ease the suffering in the lower realms, so thinking that, relatively in a human form, I'm still within samsara, but my life comparatively is relatively happy. Those in the lower realms, for example, the hungry ghosts, and in the hell realms, they are in a constant state of suffering. So may their suffering be eased. May I guide all wanderers in samsara to the pure bliss of awakening. So that is the bliss of liberation, right? The bliss of emancipation. And be of worldly benefit to them as well. So we want to lead them to that liberation, but we also want to lead them to the ultimate awakening, which is complete Buddhahood, full enlightenment. And so then in this way, we have covered 4 of these points today. Yeah. And we understand that in terms of this prayer for all of these sentient beings to be able to achieve that freedom and enlightenment, we understand that this cannot happen through prayers and aspirations alone. They're helpful, but it can't happen through praise and aspirations alone. And even ultimately, love and compassion, powerful as they are, it can't happen through that alone. To be able to really help beings achieve this, we also need to develop wisdom. And so we need to develop that wisdom, and we can really say that the supreme wisdom is the wisdom of emptiness, assisted by the understanding of dependent origination, and also the wisdom realizing dependent origination or dependent arising underpinned by emptiness. And so then, with this mindset, we will now turn to in praise of dependent arising for the last bit of class. Getting really double So we are on, for those of you who are following along, we are on verse number 7. Since this teaching is not seen elsewhere, you alone are the teacher. Like calling a fox a lion for a tirtika, it would be a word of flattery.
어다 된다 대수기도 와서 어다 라마송 가봤더니 대화치 할래비치 대화치 아니라 아고서라 땡도 사탄 gelaba 노지 땡주 동배 조르야 동바 땡주가 조르는 거 얘기 내서 땡도 아니 저러마도 되게 쓰지.
So Lama Tsongkhapa, and again, this is coming from that great mind of faith that came forth with this understanding. He is praising this teaching of emptiness assisted by the understanding of dependent origination and the wisdom penetrating in dependent origination underpinned by emptiness. And he is saying, out of all of these great teachers, it is only you who has kind of propounded this truth. So therefore, you are kind of like the supreme teacher. Only you can be called the supreme teacher. Yeah. So this is like calling a fox a lion. So I think people understand this analogy. Like a fox is actually relatively not all of that impressive compared to a lion. So calling other teachers like by these epithets, like despite them not teaching this, is kind of flattery.
아까서 못에 제라고 좀이치 세다 못에 제라고 세는 누가이나 가시다니 tem방년에 레면아 또 tem방 이선 소소 슈리신에 라줘야 되는 요아래 서로 못에 바이나 요더니 tem방 가와가와 아니 더 야바 계시기 요아래 되는 이나 대절라 아니 tem발라나 메바스 메바이나.
So there are all of these tirtika teachers, in other words, these teachers of these like non-Buddhist views, and also these teachers that are not able to propound this emptiness underpinned by dependent arising, and they are called sort of all of these fancy names, like a peerless one and unexcelled one. But in fact, this is just mere flattery, and in the true sense, even to call them teacher is an exaggeration. It is like calling a fox a lion.
어다 대슈리라 때네 다미야 누가이나 뭐 용비와래 서로 바이나 뭐 요게야 다도 저 슈리 우치제 단다마레 제 뭐 요아레스
churi sana like kari churi
나로 라마타 지금 이제 본도 티제 포바레스 안다고 다 들리라 때네 뭐 용비와라.
yes ale teni dandro kari tu
세시오 때문에 내려면요
ale
나로 라마타 저 슈리라 때네 다 세시 이사라고 뭐
so a lot of us have a biased mind, right, towards the teachers we like, or towards the teachers that we have affinity with, without necessarily discerning their qualities. So we may bestow all of this flowery ornamentation upon their name and so forth, without really distinguishing what they are teaching. And Geshe was saying, here it's mentioning the tirtikas, right, the non-Buddhists that are doing this, but also we see Buddhists that are doing this, not really measuring the qualities properly, but just kind of flattery. So those who are not able to describe the way things really are, the ultimate nature of reality, to bestow high titles upon them is not a function. It is just flattery. Yeah. So Geshe has a sense of humor about this. He says, you see this kind of polemical language also when we look at the 4 schools of tenets, right? So the Sutra school, the Sautantrikas, they're saying that they are the final view, and the other ones are just kind of like mere delusions and so forth. And then the Chittamantrans say this, and then of course the Madhyamikas say this. They are kind of all saying this about each other. Going the Chittamantrans salagire. And there's even a line from Chandrakirti which says that by propounding this text, all of the views of others will be rendered irrelevant, or something along those lines, rendered irrelevant. But this is not my intent to harm, it is only my intent to propound the view.
Oh, that and I mean, my kangal me that made it top, you know, or that you was.
So if we're like sort of like ornamenting and giving a lot of flattery without distinguishing the qualities and the truth that they are preaching, it can become like this verse.
Shadow me diet and in my kitten me thought to Moboya is. When I should you say, tell you, you to Jacarina. The bar and the muscle meet the muscle in the button the Bachipare. Meet our is. Yeah, you know, couldn't the bomb arrest.
So, even in the Buddhist text, so for example, in the Abhisamayalam Kara, the ornament of realization, Kodumba di Tobyo Mares, Yine Dumba Giming Kapsas.
The toy occasion, the bomb mares, Koro.
Ale.
So you say Koran the bomb mares.
Ale, it calls bodhicitta an aspiration, but the actual nature of bodhicitta is not merely an aspiration, but it gives that name to categorize.
That day, the money you made up is so you sell a so you ten years in the bar. You did 10 years in the bar, the money you made up is.
But the word aspiration is used here because bodhicitta, when it's explained, can be separated into two separate aspirations: the aspiration for enlightenment and the aspiration to achieve the welfare of sentient beings. So then achieving the welfare of sentient beings, this is actually a case of naming the aspiration as the result, right? We say like, yeah. So sometimes we say the result, we give the name of something resultant to the name of a cause. Yeah. Another example would be that on a very bright and sunny day, we might point at the reflections of the sun rays on the ground and say, look at the sun. Of course, that is not the sun. It is merely the result of the sun being in the sky are these sun rays coming to the earth. So that's another case of calling something the result, the cause, when it is actually a result. So we have to come to a vaster explanation of this later. So here the analogy is we're giving sort of a relatively humble animal, a small fox, the name of a lion. But then there is the case of a lion, a being that is actually a lion, and we are labeling it correctly and calling it thus. So there are two sort of distinct animals or distinct objects, but they are given the same name. So are they essentially the same then? So they have been given the same name. Sorry, I'm just going to shut the windows. Sorry, there's some sound. So yeah. So the actual lion and the fox, which is not a lion, they have both been given the same name of lion. But at the same time, we also say that in terms of the actual mode of abiding, they are not truly existent. They lack inherent existence. So then merely being labeled by that, does that mean that those two objects, that they are both lions? Yeah, so there's a kind of conversation that can unfold looking at this reasoning, which is also a way to examine the view. And we can come to more of a discussion of that later. Yeah. Yeah.
Made to be papaya chibare to us.
Yeah.
The Malina is Sengasegre,
Yeah.
Inelina is Sengasegre to us.
Yeah.
Ruji Japanicalio was.
Yeah, didn't it?
Didn't you get chibare?
Oh, so there's a question that can come, right? That we have labeled both of these animals, the fox and the lion, as a lion. So obviously one is a lion, but one is not. But we also understand that the objects do not exist from their own side because they both lack inherent existence. So because of the fact that they both lack inherent existence, why is it the fact that we cannot name them the same thing? Because neither of them exists from their own side.
Because
whatever merely named or mere label that we put upon the object, whether that label might fit with the object conventionally or not, the object still doesn't exist from its own side. It still lacks inherent existence. And so all of these are ways to kind of use these verses to further penetrate the meaning of emptiness. And so the next thing that we have to think about is how dependent arising and how emptiness relate to our experience within samsara, and specifically how they relate to pleasant and unpleasant feelings, or to feelings of happiness and suffering. So one of the things that's important to understand here is that the feelings that we experience, the reactions that we experience related to specific objects, they relate to us cognizing, to our cognition of this object as being something stable and existing from its own side. And the thing that is reifying the object in that way and making it seem like something that is stable is the ignorance grasping at the self and permanence. But with an understanding of dependent arising and emptiness as relational, sort of working as a team, we will be able to uproot that ignorance grasping at the self. And so that is why dependent arising and emptiness and their relationship is so important, because it relates to our experience of happiness and suffering, and they are also tools which will help us to uproot our ignorance. But the coarser levels of dependent arising in particular, right? These are not things that are so difficult to understand. We can see how planting a seed in the ground, depending on the water and fertilizer, a sprout in a plant can manifest, right? So we can get rid of the experience of the difficulties of samsara by eliminating the causes of samsara. And the causes of samsara can be uprooted by this wisdom of recognizing dependent arising. So you are the one who showed us the method, who provided us with this tool. That is the true teacher. So in this way, I praise the Buddha as the teacher. So we do have a story today. Yeah, like, questions have been a little bit sparse lately, but we'll dedicate the merits. Then if you need to get on with your day, please do. And afterwards, we welcome questions. And if there's no questions, maybe we'll have the story. So let us dedicate the merits. Jiangju Senju Rinpoche Maje Panam Jeju Rechi Chewa Nyamba Mepa Yang Gone Gondo Pewa Tongni Tawa Rinpoche Maje Panam Jeju Rechi Chewa Nyamba Mepa Yang Gone Gondo Pewa Jumbo Pao Jeda Jemba Mudu Zapo Dean Deshin Deda Gunju Jesu Dalo Kewa Dida Dangje Ratu Nizo Jebe Jawa Dangje Ngawa Gana Chodo Ngaba Dagi Kewe Sawa Dogo Zambo Chuji Rado. Through the force of these merits, may every place within samsara be transformed into a pure land. All the 6 types of sentient beings within samsara be led to the state of Buddhahood or enlightenment. May any negative karma that is leading to obstacles to our physical and mental health be completely cleared away so that we may achieve success in developing our love, compassion, bodhicitta, and wisdom. So we'll pause there. Just let me turn the volume on so that we can check if we have some questions. So, are there any questions?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Tashidelek. My question, if Geshe noticed that we can only achieve Buddhahood if we have a lack of ignorance, then this link of 12 dependent origination, these 12 links, it starts with ignorance, but in my perception, we can also start from that. And I ask also why Bardo is not mentioned, because if I
Sorry,
think
why what?
Bardo, the Bardo state. So
in the 12 links?
We start with ignorance and we end with old age and death in the 12 links of, and we always start with ignorance. But in my perception, we can also start from that, and then from the state of Bardo, because in the state of Bardo, there we can, if we not have a notion about emptiness, then we can jump in a womb, and then we create a life, a new life, and from this new life, in ignorance exists. So do you understand
so I think are you asking if Bardo comes before ignorance or if ignorance comes before the Bardo? It seems like that's your question, right? You want to know why the Bardo couldn't come first, right?
And also why Bardo is not mentioned, because my perception, Bardo is very important, because if we have some understanding of emptiness, then we don't have to jump into another womb. We can go, maybe we need merits for it, I don't know, but then you can go to a Buddha field. So, and then if we make the right decision in the Bardo, then there is no ignorance. Ignorance only exists when the mind and the body comes together, you know.
What do you mean, sorry, just to unpack your question, what do you mean by making the right decision in the Bardo? What does that mean?
Yeah, that we jump, if you have this Bardo prayer, then it's also said we can have this choice to jump into the mother's womb. We see two partners, and then the mind jumps into the body, and from jumping into the body, from there ignorance can exist. So if we not jump into the womb, then we have no body.
You don't think the ignorance is there in the Bardo?
Yeah. Sorry?
Are you saying the ignorance is not there in the Bardo?
I don't know. It's just my question. Why not? Why not start from that and Bardo? Because then I think if we in the Bardo we not jump in the womb, then there is no ignorance.
Okay, all right, okay, yeah, I'll do my best. Nganso di Bardo seria di tenjegi en la chuni yere wa dene tambo di mari pachi kretua ine ko Bardo chi kretua karinsana Bardo gi murnam yores Bardo gi murnam la tene nganso di kawadro da madro kewa kawadro da madro dro tubia gi ne so chi tua dene di double chi samlo tang tubna dene kanesla gore marikpa gi ola double chi dro goyamandus dene kochena Bardo tenjagi en la chuni nang la karichene yomares di chikche ane nipa di Bardo ne kawadro da madro hakona dene marikpa chik mebaso goyamandus karienzana nganso Bardo gi monam jena chila tene dro tugire dua di segire
Bardo la tene
yeah
Bardo de tene yolo jinya rogo ya mare kare mei Bardo ayene mei jo ape jele no rogo yare oda koro so rogo was
yeah isn't
the no Bardo ina
yeah
the no jo ape jele kuto rogo yare
oh right yeah
that mei ne mei rogo was
yeah
so tene yolo jinya
So the Bardo isn't mentioned in the 12 links, and it doesn't need to be, because the 12 links are looking from the point of view of the next life. So if we are going to an animal rebirth, we go to a Bardo of the animals. If we are going to a human rebirth, we go to the Bardo of the human beings.
Maybe just a case of this.
Yeah. So we understand that when we speak about karma, and that being the propelling karma that leads us to a rebirth, whether it's as a human or an animal, the Bardo is part of that experience. It doesn't need to be mentioned separately, but it is included, right? Theoretically within that. Right. Because we talk about the fully ripened karma or the propelling karma, which is going to lead us into our next rebirth. So that is the karma is included within that presentation, and the Bardo is just like the way station between that as we get propelled into the new rebirth.
다 거기 티소고서 바자 슈치고 또 침보더니 요기나 다 바디텔 코로포에 요야 놀래도 들이 바자 슈치고 세네라 아니 타발은 거 아니 진짜 좀 봐도 리우기
So what is true is that if one has really trained, there's no shortcut though, but if one has really trained in hearing, contemplation, and meditation, and one can use that contemplation, there are cases where one can go from the Bardo to a state of liberation. One can become a hearer or a foe destroyer. So this is definitely something that's possible.
That age, Maripal to Maripa was
But it wouldn't make sense to say that you don't start with ignorance and you don't work on eliminating ignorance, because what's the definition of a hearer? What's the definition of a foe destroyer? They have to have defeated ignorance to be able to achieve those states. So there's no way of getting around tackling ignorance. So it is not a fail-safe, it is not guaranteed, but yes, there are some instances where somebody is in the process of just entering the bardo, and they may be headed for an animal rebirth due to negative karma. But because of the Lama's intervention, they are able to be pulled back from that. There are cases where this happens, yes. Yeah. But normally, we say that once one has entered the bardo, you are guaranteed to take a subsequent rebirth, unless the only caveat is you become a hearer or a solitary realizer or something like that. So if one is already a realized being when one enters the bardo, like those great masters or those great lamas, then yes, it's possible that from the bardo you go to a state of realization or something like that, but that's not usually going to be the case. Yeah, and really for them to be able to do that, to transform that bardo experience into something, they need a deep familiarization, with the practices necessary to do that, as well as a great mass of positive karma. Yeah, Maribagi Wongne. But in terms of those beings that we said they become a hearer or a solitary realizer within the bardo, that happens exactly from taking ignorance as the beginning point, cultivating the antidote to ignorance, and defeating that ignorance with the wisdom realizing emptiness. That is how they become a foe destroyer or a hearer. And so you do hear these stories, which are the exceptional cases, like the Buddha in one of his previous lives before he was enlightened, he was like in the hell realm, and that is where he first witnessed terrible suffering. That brought forth this really strong kind of love, compassion, and bodhicitta. And then on that basis, he immediately left the hell realm and went up somewhere else. So there are stories like that, but they are exceptions. But that's why it's important to practice and to put these imprints in our minds. These imprints are very, very important, and it is based upon extraordinary imprints within the mind that it becomes possible, right, for like a hell realm experience to be transformed into something to bring forth love, compassion, and even bodhicitta, right? It happens from all of those imprints that one has worked to establish. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, please feel free to think about it and ask more later. Like there was quite a lot there, so I tried to convey all of it, but I may have forgotten pieces. Next question.
I have a question. Tashidele, do you hear me?
Yep. I can hear you, yes. Yep.
Yeah. My question is about when and how, when you come from another culture, like when Buddhism is not given to you as a teaching when you are younger, and you find it somehow through your life and your suffering and then you are interested in, and then you try to find out what it's all about. How can we, when we come from a different culture, how can we find a teacher that, what is the sign of this teacher? Because, for example, when you hear the Dharma from different teacher, different books, different, and sometimes there is one of or two teachers and say a sentence that it's become so evident to you that you understand like the essence of the teaching. Is it the sign that you can trust this teacher and do everything to have this teacher as your own teacher, or you just need, as everything come out of emptiness, if it's not better to just let it go, and then the good teacher comes to you because of your effort and your your letting be?
Nganso di perna nganso di nampa richum ne mayingen da bochi roa perna Buddhist sacha mepa da bochi check roa. Then nganso di gegen chi da bochi sel go gre dua. Then gegen sel ne nganso nguma tumpa ngune yodang mes kechimo bochi dua roa. Then gegen selpe kaplo la ya di kandes chik so go gre duas. Di kandes chik so go gire duas. Konso tsigru kashe labne dene o di dempares nanso tsorwa dabo chik labna nga gyacha gyat hamba di kelen chik tugires samlo tangna digire dua. Matok jen ganso chik parsha gores dene ganso betsu yapo chene gewa mambo sana dene rangjingi gegen dabo chik legire duas di dabo chik repesa.
메미다 들이 사자라 알레 또 소소근 다 니까 거기 강에 간리슬 거기 아까서와 너도 이런 거야 저 그러면 저 이런 거야 니까 거기 마셀 여보 저야 간리슬이 야 또 간리진 배우도 또 되다 그랬어.
So the main thing when choosing a teacher and evaluating a teacher is through contemplating his or her instructions. Are you able to bring forth more positive minds? Does your mind become more peaceful and relaxed? Are you able to stop kind of overreacting, are you experiencing a diminishment of afflictions and so forth? If we are cultivating the teacher's instructions and we're experiencing those benefits, that may be a sign that they are the right teacher for us.
Yeah, never mind. So keep 주 가르가르도. 제 가르가르도.
Yeah. So the first thing is to think, what do we need? What do we need to improve our own mind? And what kind of cultivations and instructions are going to help us do that, to benefit ourselves and to benefit others? If we can find a teacher who is able to provide that, then we can think about relying upon them. That's the first step of things to consider.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
We have questions from Dana and Dekili.
Yeah, go ahead.
Deki, go ahead, because I think, Dekili, you were before me. You had your hand up, so go ahead, and I'll go after you.
Dekili, maybe she's muted or stepped away. I can't hear her. So I can't hear you, Dekili. What I'm going to suggest is maybe send the message. If you want to send a typed message to Dave, and we'll take Donna's question in the meantime, because I can't hear you at all. Sorry about that, but feel free to send your question to Dave. We'll get to your question. Go ahead, Donna, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I hope my question doesn't mean that the story isn't going to be told, because I do enjoy the stories and find them really helpful. I have a couple of very quick questions. One is whether you could please suggest a very simple purification practice that we could do every day? Because in my learning, I'm not familiar with purification practices. And the other one is you talked about the 4 Maras, and you named like one called the Son of Gods, one called the Lord of Death. I don't know what that means. So I was wondering whether you could give a brief explanation, please, so I know how to watch out for them.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah. So Tambodi nganso di dikpa shakpagine suchikere ro di morongi namchinang la konso dikpa jangye dang dikpa shakpagine so sheda yo mare duas deni le tamboa dabochik yena dikpa shapa dipa jangya gi netso kares chik lamen chugres le labochik pe dabochik lashos ane nipa di nganso duji ginanglola nganso di la dupe du dang chidaki du chik labna di kareres like shinang sabumi dabochik di donda kareres di seglesa
다 nganzo kangal ka chembo des ta nganzo nyepa masa se ya ma nyepa mo ko was nyepa kandi chile chawa ina yo ko sarwa ane nyepa kandi chile ba ina yo nyepa tel no so shi to na shu so na
yeah
nyepa tel no so shi ta cho ndi ma so ma na shu so na nyepa de pe to yo ma ko des kwa.
So in terms of purification, Donna, of course, we're all going to be making mistakes and accumulating faults. We can't abandon those completely right from the beginning. But just something very simple that we can do right from now is when it arises, immediately seeing that it's a fault, acknowledging that it's a fault or a mistake, and then on that basis, bringing forth a measure of regret, thinking it was not good that I did that. When we do this, already some of the negative potential of that fault is addressed. So it is said that when we recognize that action that we did as a fault, as something negative, that stops the action from being able to gain karmic momentum and being able to become heavier and heavier. So it stops that factor of increase of the karma. We often talk about karma increases. So it can hinder that increase. So once we do that, once we recognize it as a fault and bring forth that mind of regret for the action, then we can start to engage in specific purification practices relatively easily. Without these preliminary steps of recognizing it as a fault and experiencing some regret for the action, it's going to be difficult to do that. In fact, we're supposed to be almost like hyper aware of these negativities to the point that when we do something really heavy and negative, we have the same feeling as if we just accidentally drunk a glass of poison or something. That's the analogy that's given. And that's the kind of strong level of regret which is going to help us work on a complete purification. So then after we've gone through those contemplations, then we think, I want to apply an antidote, right? I want to engage in some type of practice as an antidote to this negativity. So now we come to a discussion of what are known as the 4 opponent powers, and there's lots of information about this online too, Donna, if you want to research this. But some of them, some lamas give the power of a complete eradication first, and then they give the power of the basis. Others give the power of the basis, and then give the power of complete eradication second. Geshe likes putting the power of complete eradication as the first of the four opponent powers, as many lamas do, because he thinks this is more powerful way to think about it. So that complete eradication is that complete, like, heavy regret for the negative thing that one has done. And then we have the power of the basis. And when we think about the power of the basis, when we think about negativities or faults, they're accumulated only on the basis of two types of objects, either Buddhas or sentient beings. That's the first division. We accumulate those faults either on the basis of Buddhas or sentient beings. And so because the accumulation of faults happens on the basis of one of those two roads, when we fall down on the ground, we have to push ourselves up again from the ground. So we're going to have to use an antidote that relates to either Buddhas or sentient beings. So when we speak of the antidote, then if the fault arose related to the Buddhas, we can use the practice of refuge. We can go for refuge as a way of purifying that. If the fault arose related to sentient beings, then we can try and bring forth a love and compassion as an antidote to that fault related to sentient beings. So we talked about the power of the basis, right? Sentient beings and Buddhas, and the accompanying practices of refuge and love and compassion. And then we have various, under the power of the antidotes, very specific practices. And so this is where you come to a discussion of specific practices like reciting sutras. You have like the Confession Sutra. You have the practice of the Vajrasattva mantra, the purification mantra. So these are a few of the practices that you can do. In fact, it is said that if you recite the long Vajrasattva mantra 21 times per day, any negativity that you've accumulated, it stops the process of it building momentum or increasing. We could say that the very best power of the antidote, though, would be profound meditations on wisdom realizing impermanence, wisdom realizing emptiness, and so forth. This wisdom can be the most powerful antidote. Also, the practice of tonglen, of taking and giving. Yeshe did a short video on this recently, if you're interested. This can also be a very powerful antidote to negative karma. And then the fourth one, which reinforces all of them, is turning one's back on the fault. This is sometimes, in English, they give like cute sort of in a capsule translation. So rather than saying turning back on the fault, they say the power of the promise. So that's not wanting to do the same fault again. And it is said that if these four powers are there in kind of a very stable way, then even if we've accumulated like one of the 5 actions of immediate retribution, even this can be purified. Sorry, while we're taking questions, just if people who aren't asking a question could just mute the mic, it'll just help to improve the sound quality. And then now we have to ask about these 2 maras. And so actually, this power of purification as related to the 4 powers, these are something that is extremely important, and it's going to be important all throughout our life of practice. So the Mara, son of the gods, often it's rendered in the Sanskrit of the Deva Putra. Mara, Deva is like a god being, and Putra is the son. So this it's sort of a deity, a being of sorts. And it is said that this type of being, when we try to engage in virtue, for example, when we try to sit down and meditate, we might experience that all of a sudden our mind is like more disturbed, more scattered, more distracted. And sometimes it is said that this is because of this Deva Putra Mara. And so, and we can also think of it in a broader category of all different types of beings and deities that can bring forth distraction in our practice. Yeah. So there is this deity called Garam Wangchuk, and he is, I think it may be Ishvara in Sanskrit, but I'm not sure, my apologies. And he is said to be the lord of this desire realm.
So his
worry is he's the ruler of the desire realm. So he worries that if meditators achieve concentration, they may go to the form or the formless realm, and then he'll have less subjects. He'll have less people in his realm. So he wants to disturb us somehow. Yeah.
So
and there's a lot of stories related to this deity. So La Brahma. Mari gom tegen sure. Samba is Brahma, yeah. Okay, so so these go back to these Vedic deities, right? So there's a story that one time Lord Brahma was meditating, and no matter sort of how strongly he was trying to meditate, he wasn't able to concentrate. And he had his like third eye. So this is the eye that can see all. So he left his place of meditation and he looked and he saw that it was this Garam Wangchuk in the aspect of Kamadeva, like shooting kind of arrows of desire to disturb him. So he saw him shooting these arrows of desire. So we call them arrows, but it's more beneficial to think of them as being attachment, aversion, jealousy, all of those unpleasant minds that disturb us. So Brahma became very upset, and from his third eye, he manifested a fire of wisdom, and this was able to kind of burn away Garam Wangchuk in this aspect of Kamadeva. Yeah, and on this basis, Garam Wangchuk, his physical body was gone, but his subtle body was still there. And that is why he is called the Lume Dagpo. That's why he is called the bodiless guardian of the desire realm. But it all stems back to like he doesn't want to have less people under him in this desire realm. And yeah, and the Mara, the Lord of Death, is just this uncontrolled process of death driven by karma and affliction. That's what we can understand about that. And we can think about all of the practices of profound dharma of both sutra and tantra as being helping us to defeat these four maras. Yeah. So hopefully, Dana, that answered your questions.
That was really, really helpful. One very, very quick related question is, how do I know if my regret, the bad thing I do, falls within the realm of the Buddhas or the realm of the sentient beings? I don't know what those two are.
Nanso digpa samge la tene chungsung kandes hakogire, semshen la tene chungsung kandes hakogires.
So
it's actually quite easy to distinguish. Most of the things are related to sentient beings. With the Buddhas, it's like we criticize the Buddha or his doctrine or look down or disparage somehow. So that maybe is something that not a lot of us have done in this lifetime, but definitely it's possible we did it in previous lifetimes. So often Geshe has told the story about Vasubandhu, right? Who his brother Asanga had seen Maitreya and he wanted to be able to see Maitreya too. But then it was said that he had to do a lot of meritorious things and to be able to see Maitreya in a subsequent lifetime, because in that lifetime he had criticized a lot of the Mahayana teachings, and because of that, that was like criticizing the Buddha in a way. So that's one understanding of that. He had such a strong regret about the things he had said that he was actually thinking of like cutting out his tongue, but his brother stopped him. Yes, and that's the strength of that regret. When we talk about the power of complete eradication that can completely eradicate negativity, that's the kind of regret we're talking about. And so then they said to Vasubandhu, you know, you don't need to cut out your tongue. That's ridiculous. There are many other ways that you could like purify this negative karma. So the instruction that he got from Maitreya through Asanga is that Asanga advised him that you actually need to, Asanga advised him that Maitreya instructed to compose many treatises, compose many profound texts on the Dharma, and this will purify that negative karma. And in fact, one of those texts was the Abhidharma Kosha, and the Abhidharma Kosha remains a very important text to this day that is still studied, for example, in the 3 seats of Sera, Drepung, and Ganden. And on that basis, not only was he able to purify a lot of his negative karma, he was also able to bring forth great wisdom. Yeah, so hopefully that covers it. And
that was really, really clear and helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Dave, did Dekuli's question come through to you?
Yes, it did.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So Dekuli's asking, could you re-explain coarse and subtle dependent arising and emptiness and its relationship to eliminating obscurations and knowledge obscurations or afflictions?
Yeah. Nanso Tenjun Trapo Tang, Tenjun Rapa, Tenjun Rapa Dang, Tenjun Tramo. He's laughing because I used the wrong vocabulary. But I have the right vocabulary. I called it stubborn dependent arising and subtle dependent arising when I should have said coarse, and he's saying I was trying to call him stubborn. That's why he's laughing. I did not call Geshe stubborn, just for the record. Dinso kepar kandes chigres rakpa dang tramo tenjun rakpa dang tramo compagnie ane dinso kandes laukare jibni rwa nyumongi jib dang shinjibni jawa kandes chigres lash.
Metenju rapa do tenju rapa do tramo.
Yeah, ane compagnie rapa dang.
Metenju rapa do tramo sering anzo noji da chijis desen was. Da chijis de kuzaga da. Yeah. One Johan Regime Papa. Chachela Matipi.
Yeah.
Jivo.
Yeah.
Jijela Matipi. Rumo.
Yeah.
Or did you come in Rapati?
So when we speak about compagnie,
Nasa,
yeah.
Nasa de
compagnie Rakpa.
Mimi Nasa de Tabeton.
Yeah.
Akasara.
Yeah.
And a Chachela Matipi Ruin.
Yeah.
Oh,
so when we speak about coarse dependent arising, we can speak of this coarse dependent arising refuting the ideas that there is a self that is permanent, independent, and not depending on parts and the like. No, the self is a dependent arising. So this is hitting at coarser dependent arising.
하고서 어떤 미냐 렌저기네스 도지 자주 보여왔어. 렌저기네스 때문에 된지. 렌저기네스 참모세나?
Yeah, so we can also 렌저기네스 참모레라고 하죠.
렌저기네스라고 뭐지요? 와스 스테이지 된지로 봐요.
And there are also many cause and effect relationships, many karmic kind of unfoldings that we can observe easily. This is also said to be like a coarser kind of dependent arising.
당 아주 들은 들리지는 잘 내가 제토야. 내가 제일 쉬운 봐. 어디저 가르라 때 쉬운 봐. 저때 디세 가디사 바리. 니마 가디사 바리. 사데 때 렌저 차쇼.
And it tenju. So all of us coming together at this particular time to listen to this particular Dharma talk, whatever causes we accumulated, the particular cause, what lifetime we accumulated in that, with those causes, what the motivation was for those causes that was accumulated. This is a very subtle understanding of cause and effect, which can also said to be subtle dependent arising. But the lack of inherent existence of every phenomena, that is said to be the most subtle, profound implication of dependent arising. And it's the same, in fact, when we speak of the most subtle understanding of emptiness, it's the emptiness of inherent existence. That's also the most subtle understanding of emptiness.
Yeah.
And when we speak of this related to afflicted and knowledge obscurations, when we say an afflicted obscuration, this means ignorance, grasping at the self, attachment, anger, and so forth.
Yeah.
And these are all the kind of opposing factors to that realization of dependent arising, for example, these afflictions such as the ignorance, grasping at the self, and the related minds. So the wisdom realizing dependent arising is a mind which is necessarily opposed to that ignorance, grasping at the self, permanence, and the related afflictions.
Yeah.
When we imbue this practice of the wisdom realizing dependent arising and emptiness with love and compassion, then that is said to that gets rid of the imprints left behind by the afflictions. And so that is the knowledge obscuration. So when you're countering the afflictions directly, that's the afflicted obscurations. When you are getting rid of the imprints left behind, that helps to uproot the knowledge obscurations.
Shiba.
So there are some people that are saying that actually the knowledge obscurations are a consciousness, and there are others that are saying these knowledge obscurations are not a consciousness. Yeah, we are saying that they are not a consciousness in our system. It's just a latency or kind of an obscuring power. That's how we think of them. But other scholars refute that, and they say actually they are a consciousness, or they're a combination of the consciousness and kind of a latency or power. Yeah, so vast topic. Kendra's getting overwhelmed. Well, yeah, for some of these deeper things, I do need to read a little bit. So we can come to more of a conversation of those later.
There was a second part to Dekili's question.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
These coarse and subtle dependent arising and emptiness relationships, are they directly related or direct causes to their elimination at different stages of the path?
Okay. To the elimination of what? Now I'm confused because you're talking about dependent arising. Can you say the question again?
Yeah, I'll read the whole thing. Could you re-explain coarse and subtle dependent arising and emptiness and its relationship to eliminating obscurations and knowledge obscurations afflictions?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they directly related or direct causes to their elimination at different stages of the path?
Thank you. Okay, yeah, I got it now. Nganso di tenjung rakpa dang tramodi ngaronso di kandesla gore nyunjib dang shinjib jawa kandeshikre stila so deni shinjib dang nyunjib mepaso leb tubya ginuba nganso di kandesla gore sa dang lam dang dinsola keparchikyuresa.
다들 제가 친구야 왔어. 그냥 저기 semba 다 솔로 친구니 솔로 니니가 저나 주세요.
장주선바.
솔로 친구 사니야 야진로야 돼.
Yeah.
또 된지 타라 또 받아 드려야 돼.
So yes, there's a relationship here, and it is said that when the bodhisattva is on the path of accumulation,
솔로 친구는
and there's a small, middling, and great path accumulation. So when he or she is on the great path of accumulation, they are then getting to the level where on that great path of accumulation, they need to start using these subtle dependent arising and contemplating the subtle dependent arising. And from there, the moment that they're able to understand that, they can enter the first bhumi, the first bodhisattva ground, and then they can progress through the various bodhisattva grounds. Shinjib, I think, but I don't think that's what Dekili is asking. I think what she's asking is the difference between when you're defeating the afflicted obscurations and the knowledge obscurations, and if the ability to defeat the afflicted obscurations versus the knowledge obscurations happens at some point on the path. Is that what she's asking? I can't see her. If she gives a thumbs up.
She's shaking her head. Thumbs up.
Oh,
thumbs
no, it's
down.
not what she's asking. Okay, all right. So now I'm really unclear as to the question. So don't think of it that subtle dependent arising or emptiness is like an antidote to just knowledge obscurations and not afflictions, or that coarse dependent arising and emptiness is an antidote to like either coarse or subtle dependent, is the antidote is to that is coarse or subtle dependent arising or emptiness. The coarseness and the subtlety of the dependent arising or emptiness do not necessarily relate to the defeat of the afflicted or the knowledge obscurations, just to make that clear. Yeah. So in order to defeat, and just to show how this is the case, in order to defeat the ignorance grasping at the self, which is an afflicted obscuration, it is not a knowledge obscuration, it's an afflicted obscuration. To defeat that, you need the most subtle wisdom realizing the emptiness of inherent existence. So you need that subtle wisdom realizing emptiness to be able to defeat that particular afflicted obscuration, the ignorance grasping at the self. And the real final kind of ignorance grasping at the self and the grasping at true existence, you also need that really subtle realization of subtle dependent arising. Without that, you can't defeat this particular afflicted obscuration.
근데 이제 아마 루제바 세존바 걸어서 땡주도 비시라죠 알아. 와서 뒤가 마리바 라바지 마도 마리바 인에 되게 뭐 로트 그랬어요. 아마 루제바도 세존바 걸어서 땡주도 비시라죠 알아.
Right. So then we talk about the other schools like the Madhyamika Sotantrikas and all the other schools. They have their own understanding of a dependent arising, but it is not But it can only defeat the coarsest manifestation of ignorance. It cannot defeat that subtle manifestation of ignorance. Yeah. So there's really questions as to whether people that achieve liberation based on those other schools have achieved it or not. Yeah. Then so now I think we should ask, well, what helps us defeat the knowledge obscuration then? What is that? I think to tie up the question, we should ask that. Then also Shinji di mebasoela kandeshchikugides. Yeah. So to defeat the knowledge obscuration, you also need that wisdom realizing subtle emptiness or subtle dependent arising, but it needs to be imbued with those factors of love and compassion. If you have that, then one can defeat that knowledge obscuration. So what is a knowledge obscuration? A knowledge obscuration is what is obscuring our final knowledge of being able to reach that state of Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So the final obstacle which prevents us from reaching that ultimate state of Buddhahood to serve all sentient beings, that is the knowledge obscuration. So what is obscuring us from achieving that state of liberation from karma and affliction for our own peace, for our own benefit, that is the afflicted obscuration. So I hope that if we didn't answer Deki Lee's question fully, at least we had an interesting exploration from that. And Deki Lee, please, you're absolutely welcome to come back with more next week or to email me if you have further questions. But as we are 25 on the hour, I think maybe we should. Did it answer the question? Geshe wants to know. Because we can't hear Deki Lee, it's a bit harder to communicate. Is it okay? All right. Okay, good.
Where'd you go?
It did.
Sorry, Dave?
You can hear me. It did.
Oh, it did? Okay, good. Yes, I can hear you now. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah. Jason. So thank you. We will end it here. And remember, on the 18th, that's going to be our last Sunday before a short holiday break. So maybe see you next Sunday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Geshe-la, Venerable. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.